Americans have always pulled together in times of struggle, joined hands, and worked together no matter what the circumstances. Yet some Americans struggle alone, not because people don't care about their plight, but because many simply don't know about it. This is the kind of challenge faced by the more than 34 million Americans who live in poverty every day. For them, life can mean a lonely fight to pay bills, find health care, and simply make ends meet.
Poverty is hopelessness. Poverty is an experience when there seems to be no way out of a set of conditions. For a person that experiences poverty, his or her situation is so bad, so bleak, that they have very little options left.
How do we begin to face poverty? How can we, as individuals, join forces to effect change? Across America, people of faith have found an answer in biblical teachings and are striving toward long-term solutions by attacking poverty's causes together.
The churches have said they will stand in the gap. Where the government has failed to achieve, they will stand in and push on the issues that are relevant to our families.
People have forgotten the connection between faith and social justice. What we're trying to do is help them remember the link, and do that by going back to the biblical vision of justice.
Guided by this vision of justice, grassroots organizations are working to bring opportunity, empowerment, and hope. Their work doesn't always make the headlines, but day by day, person by person, they're making a difference. Sweatshop workers in New York City, migrant farm laborers in Oregon, ex-cons in South Central LA. What do these people have in common? They're all residents of America's 51st state, Poverty, USA. There are 34 million people living there, almost as many as live in California. Many of its residents work full-time, 2 jobs, or even 3, and still can barely make ends meet. 1/6 of all of America's children live there, a higher percentage than most industrialized nations.
I think the American public typically thinks of poor people as those who are out of the labor force, people who are jobless, people who are unemployed, people who refuse to work. But in fact, the much larger population of poor people in the United States are low-wage workers. They're people who work year-round, full-time, but whose earnings at and around the minimum wage don't pull them above the poverty line. And that's the vast majority of who the American poor are. They're the working people whose wages don't keep them above the poverty line.
Right now, our government poverty level is that for a family of 4, making $17,000 a year means that you're in poverty. It's really impossible for most individuals to be able to live on $17,000 a year, let alone a family of 4. And many people who are on minimum wage don't even come anywhere near that $17,000 a year. So it's really a serious problem that we have.
Of course, there's nothing new about poverty. There's always been a divide between haves and have-nots. And there's always been a human impulse to extend a helping hand to the poor. But it is not as common to work with them to overcome poverty for a lifetime. Yet that is a ministry with biblical roots.
Jesus' ministry was a ministry in which he moved along and among the people. He didn't ask them where they lived. He didn't ask them what their financial background was. He simply asked them, would they be made whole? If you were blind, he would make them to see. If they were hungry, he would feed them. And so we are compelled to do the same thing.
In the Judeo-Christian tradition, we've always had teachings about our concern for the most vulnerable people in society. You look at the Old Testament and you see constant references to helping the widow and the orphan and sharing the resources that God gives you.
In the Old Testament, there is a verse in the book of Amos. Let justice surge like water, and goodness like an unfailing stream. an apt metaphor for the ways that people of faith are working towards solutions for the problem of poverty.
I think it's very important when one looks at the sort of structure of the church that it reaches all the way from impoverished poor communities in the inner city to very affluent communities in the suburbs. And there's a structure there, at least in place, to consider sharing and caring that's very difficult to replicate in the political sphere, for example.
Often these programs are run by small local churches and other groups. Their funds are tight, and crucial support comes from national organizations like the Catholic Campaign for Human Development. Founded in 1970, the campaign has been a leader in developing this kind of innovative self-help program. They've funded more than 4,000 programs over the years, distributing more than $260 million. This funding is based on need and goes to organizations regardless of their religious affiliation. The campaign seeks to help the poor develop economic strength and political power, while at the same time educating the community about the problems of poverty.
It's the people who are living in poverty that know best how to get out of it. And when they are committed to it, when they take ownership in the projects that they are starting, then they bring about the change. They know best the solutions in their own local areas.
By working at the causes of poverty, these programs have planted seeds of hope in what, at first glance, might seem like infertile soil.
When I came to Camden, Camden was clean, okay? It was beautiful. I used to live on North Camden, and the people would sit in the steps, and the children, we would play while our mothers.
I can go back to when I was younger in Camden, and just to give you an idea of how good the services were in Camden, there was a time when jaywalking for us as young children was of great concern for us, and it was enforced. I just kind of go back because they were kind of, to me, they were kind of glory days.
Those glory days are gone. Factories that employed thousands now stand empty. When jobs left, more than 30,000 people followed. But a devoted group of those who stayed behind simply refused to let their city be tossed on the junk heap.
The first thing you have to do is organize. If it's a church-based organization, it's better, because why churches? Churches are the oldest institutes in the cities, and they never go away, okay? People come and go, but the church is always here.
One of the most powerful forces in Camden today is Camden Churches Organized for People. CCOP, as it's known, is a community organizing group that seeks to increase the city's quality of life.
We talk to individuals, we get them to come together, and then we began to challenge them around the fact that, you know, you may be one person, but, you know, you can make a difference.
Starting in 1996, with the help of the Campaign for Human Development, CCOP set its sights on Camden's housing crisis and the far-reaching effects of abandoned housing. CCOP lobbying led to a major board-up effort by the city. Closing off the houses helped reduce crime, but revitalizing neighborhoods called for still more action.
The fact is that many people who are poor pay more for housing than people who have access to greater wealth. And the more money they have to put into housing, the less money they have available for food, for medicine for their children, for having good and safe child care available for their children.
Our poverty line was originally calculated around a food budget, but food has actually shrunk dramatically as a proportion of the average family's sort of expense basket, and housing has just rocketed up. So housing is a very serious problem.
That's where St. Joseph's Carpenter Society comes in. Their work is based on the idea that by reclaiming abandoned homes and providing decent, affordable housing, you reclaim abandoned communities.
This is their house, their home. This is the place which that specific family or any family can retreat, and they know it's theirs. And that is a really important sort of social factor of home ownership. It allows us a sense of permanence.
Since 1985, the St. Joseph's Carpenter Society has built 250 units of housing. These homes have transformed the lives of people like Nancy and Jose Marrero and their 3 children. Lifelong residents of Camden, they've just taken possession of their new home in Camden's Liberty Park neighborhood.
We lived in a house up the street, and we were like pretty familiar with the neighborhood. So we drove past and we saw a sign on the door that says for sale, St. Joseph's Carpenter Society. So we decided to give them a call. And then we worked our way from there.
Today, their kids can play in their own backyard and run to the corner store in a neighborhood where they're known and cared about.
I try to go away from Camden, but I just keep coming back. I call this my home.
Same here. I mean, I know a lot of people out here. I'm very familiar with the neighborhood, so it's like walking outside is like walking around the side of the house to me.
Transformations like these show the power of grassroots action and the importance of empowerment in stopping the cycle of poverty.
Being faith-based people, being believers, we walk by faith and not by sight. And when I look at things in Camden, my eyes tell me that this is, it may even be beyond hope. That's what my eyes tell me. But my heart doesn't tell me that. My heart tells me that, if we put in all that we can put in, and if we really believe that we can make this thing change.
The work being done in Camden is just one example of how ordinary Americans can make a difference in their own communities. The same work is being done in places as diverse as suburban Oregon.
What we're trying to do is bring folks together from across that economic chasm in conversation.
And South Central LA. Their stories, when Among the People, continues. It's a wet, chilly Sunday afternoon in Hillsboro, Oregon, but this barn has become a place of warmth. Here, just outside of Portland, people from both ends of America's economic spectrum have come together in faith and action. They've learned that poverty can't be confronted from a distance, and it's not just about handouts.
Unfortunately, when we see someone who's less privileged than we are, we see someone in need of our charity. And that's a pretty unfortunate misconception.
We have here in Oregon a situation that's happening in many parts of the country where we have this split between a high-tech, high-income experience for some folks and a service-level, low-income situation for another part of the economy. What we're trying to do is bring folks together from across that economic chasm in conversation.
That economic divide is getting wider every day. America has experienced a quarter century of rising prosperity, but that prosperity has not been equally distributed. In fact, since the 1960s, the gap between the incomes of the richest and poorest Americans has doubled. People like the residents of Campo Azul have been left behind. Campo Azul is a migrant farm workers camp that's home to more than 100 people, mostly Mexican immigrants. There is no running water here and only communal bathrooms. Many of these tiny shacks house as many as 7 people. But the people of Campo Azul are working to change these conditions, and working alongside them to bring better conditions are parishioners from a pair of Catholic churches in the Portland area.
Our hope is that by coming out to a work project, that certainly it will make a more dignified home for the people who live here, but it is the encounter with the migrant workers, seeing the conditions, beginning to see how complex the issue is, that then will lead to advocacy work with migrant workers.
Many of them asked us what they could do, could donate, or could bring. We told them that it was not a matter of bringing things or giving things. We told them to go to the fields, get to know our people, talk to them, and see their needs. Then you would find out what can be done.
Since that meeting, parishioners from St. Pius and their sister parish, St. Andrews in Portland, have worked at the camp, rebuilding showers, replacing windows, and making other physical improvements. But those visits had another effect, breaking down barriers.
I think all of the parishioners are a little bit uncertain as to how do you do this. Do we look at the people? But one of the exciting things about the work was that we'd all been working together outside, and they'd sort of be opening their doors and looking at us, and pretty soon the men started coming out to join us. And it was a whole different feeling working together than us coming in and doing the work and then leaving, and no community being built.
Always concerned with social action, Leslie Weary's work with Campo Azul showed her that there is a big difference between just helping people and helping people help themselves.
A lot of people like me think that you get on your white horse and charge into the camp and you give everybody whatever they need and then you leave, and that's what you're supposed to be doing. The great people that I've gotten to know there have really opened my eyes about what justice is all about.
If every single community took ownership of the poverty problem in their own neighborhood, we would have a nation full of neighborhoods that was attending to these issues. Now, I don't think we can really afford to be just local about it. I do think this is the kind of thing that requires a national strategy and a national commitment. But ultimately, all national commitments translate down into local areas if we're just talking about implementing poverty initiatives that are going to address these issues.
1,000 miles to the south, a very different community is using a crucial tool to break the cycle of poverty in their own backyards: education. One of the greatest contributing factors to crime, low incomes, and gang violence in South Central Los Angeles, a public education system that Newsweek has called the worst in America.
Education is probably the single most critical divide between a lifetime of poverty and the opportunity to escape poverty. If you drop out of high school, you are looking at a lifetime of poverty almost for sure.
In the state of California, they use third-grade testing scores to determine how many prison beds they'll need in the future. So if you can't get an education, this state has taken the stance that by the time you reach third grade and you're not reading, we might as well prepare a prison bed for you.
Unlike St. Pius's large congregation and extensive resources, the churches in this community are mostly small storefront congregations, but they're determined to make a difference nonetheless. Through Los Angeles Metropolitan Churches, or LAM as it's known, they've found strength in numbers.
In most of our churches, only a handful of people do all the work in the church. And if the pastor's in a situation where he's the pastor, the music director, the janitor, and everything else that's required as part of the church, then how does he or she find time to build upon the vision that God has given him in that particular church? LAM is an organization that's concerned with building the capacity. And capacity is an overused word, but in this case we simply mean building the ability to do inside of small to mid-sized churches so that the churches can in turn rebuild the communities around them.
We formed a research committee, looked at some statistics from the Department of Justice, and found out that 70% of all repeat offenders have one common trait: they can't read. We were horrified by it, and so we decided to do something about it. That something was the GED Initiative.
The GED Initiative is based on a simple idea that education is the best way to break the cycle of recidivism. Starting in 1996, LAM began to lobby the state legislature to make passing a high school equivalency exam, the GED, a condition of being paroled.
They contacted me through someone saying, you talk about crime prevention, not just putting people in prison, but prevention. Our idea is let's make it a condition of their parole that they work toward their GED equivalent. And when they hit me with that, I thought that was a marvelous idea.
There were issues about what types of offenses should be considered and what types of offenses should not be considered. There were issues as to whether or not the commitment necessary to complete a GED for someone that hadn't finished school was going to outweigh a short term in prison, probation, and then back on the street doing whatever you decided to do. After all these issues were ironed out, here we are.
The initiative passed the state legislature in September 1998 as an unfunded mandate. Without state money for the program, LAM once again stepped to the plate. LAM's member congregations took responsibility for the GED classes, which will be held at community churches for the members of that community, along with other support services designed to keep parolees from slipping back to the other side of the law.
So the lawyers approach me and they tell me that they have, a particular person that they've referred, And it's exciting because what they can see too, we all realize that it's cyclical. You know, poverty, literacy, you know, drug addiction, they're all sort of related. So it's a good feeling, and I'm hearing it from the lawyers that it's a good feeling to know that you may be part of helping to break the cycle.
Every young adult or youngster that's referred out of the criminal court system, we want them to be able to come to our church to get a second chance on life. Our job is to try to intervene at some level along that curve to make a difference in the lives of those individuals.
Our best possible investment strategy as a nation for addressing poverty over the next 20 years would be to make sure those kids stay attached to schooling, graduate from high school, and have further education opportunities.
Education is a vital tool for breaking the cycle of poverty. Yet nowhere is the need more critical and the barriers more insurmountable than among homeless youth. Most experts say that children are the fastest growing part of the homeless population. They are often overlooked.
People have misconceptions about who homeless are, that homeless people are all drug addicts, that homeless people are all adults with mental illnesses, and this is just not true. Homeless children make up almost 40% of the homeless population. They're normal kids, they want to live normal lives.
Yet the daily grind of homelessness, moving from shelter to shelter, no place for personal possessions, can make normal life impossible. The first time Mary Ann Molina and her children faced a homeless shelter was a crushing experience.
We opened the door to the shelter, and I thought I made the biggest mistake of my life. It was pretty horrible.
Just a big mess. It was smells, people running everywhere, kids screaming and yelling. And we didn't want to go in.
Even the best shelters are hard on homeless children. This is the Inn at Broad. Run by the Broad Street United Methodist Church, it's a homeless shelter where Sasha and her family have often spent the night. Sasha knows it well.
This right here is like three families. It's like three kids or something. They share a room. It's a family, and then like these is families. You can put two.
In a noisy, crowded shelter, something as simple as homework can become a trial.
You gotta try to concentrate, so it's pretty hard. Other kids running around and yelling and screaming and babies tired and stuff.
It's a cruel paradox. Breaking the cycle of homelessness requires education. Yet homelessness disrupts a child's education in a brutal way. The average homeless child attends 7 or more different schools and is generally 2 to 3 grade levels behind.
Because if they're not going to be supported in their education with their basic needs, then how do we expect them to succeed? How do we expect them to break the cycle? How do we expect them to continue their education?
In February 2000 in Columbus, Ohio, Angela LaRiviere began a project aimed at helping homeless youth help themselves, the Youth Empowerment Program, or YEP. YEP is a part of the Coalition on Homelessness and Housing in Ohio, or COHIO, a statewide organization dedicated to activism on the part of the homeless.
Who all is in favor of this is not a good site for a family shelter?
Aye.
Okay.
One of YEP's primary goals is to improve educational opportunities for Ohio's 35,000 homeless children. School districts often simply aren't equipped to deal with homeless kids. Registration requires proof of address, leases, identification, things homeless kids don't have. Kids feel this loss.
It was what we consistently heard from the kids, not having consistent access to education, not having consistent access to tutoring, not having consistent access to supplies that they needed.
Even when they do go to school, they often still find themselves on the outside.
The worst part of homelessness was the kids going to the new school, and for some reason, all the kids knew, and nobody told. They just knew, and they got treated different.
We were in a shelter, and I had to take the bus every day to school. And every once in a while, I'd get scared to get off if somebody was on the bus I knew. So I'd ride down to downtown, then I'd have to walk about a mile back. And I was just scared to go to school and mention it to anyone or anything like that.
Part of changing young homeless people's attitudes toward education is changing their attitudes toward themselves. Statewide, YEP operates 7 youth councils who work together to identify the issues they face every day and begin work to improve them. At this statewide meeting in Akron, homeless youth from around the state have gathered to share their stories and discuss solutions to everyday problems.
Our events aren't all, always glamour, or, it's not always showy, but our kids, because of their heart, they really end up in some important places. They're doing some really great things.
All my friends that have YEP shirts moved to New Jersey.
In the short time since YEP was founded, they've already been able to make changes for the better. For example, in Ohio, boys over the age of 13 were prohibited from staying in shelters for women or families. The end result was often separation of children and their mothers. Debbie Holman confronted that problem when trying to get into a shelter with her 13-year-old son, Gerald.
Then she told me they don't take 13-year-old boys. And so I asked, well, is there any other places that do? And they said most places don't take 13-year-old boys. And they mentioned a place for troubled boys and said, well, you could send him there. And I'm like, I'm not going to punish my child because we're in this situation.
With the backing of YEP, Gerald was able to take part in changing these rules.
I went to a board meeting with the YEP, and one of the shelter leaders, I had talked and I told him about what I was going through, and the shelter leader, she decided to add on the part where 13-year-old boys could stay in the shelter and they can stay their families so families would not be separated.
I mean, here's this 14-year-old kid who's getting up, giving a testimony, putting a face and a story behind things. That's what really makes people move, They realize, wow, this is wrong, and that took a lot of guts for him.
Being involved in YEP has brought him out a lot where he has matured to a very, very responsible young man. I'm very proud of him, too.
Yet perhaps the most important problem YEP tackled was a lack of understanding on the part of local school boards that federal law gave homeless children very specific rights to an education.
Our kids took a trip over to the State House. They talked to our director here and decided the best thing to do would be to have a state law, and then it would be clear that local districts would have to comply with the federal legislation.
YEP joined a coalition that successfully lobbied the state legislature to pass a law that clarified and protected homeless children's rights to an education. In July 2001, Ohio became one of just a few states to pass such a law.
I need my education to do stuff, so really want my dream to be to finish school.
Initiatives like these show that YEP reaches beyond mere handouts, working instead to empower the homeless, to help them change their situation.
We're not providing direct services. We're not providing housing. We're providing them an opportunity to set their own course for their life, to learn how to take control of their own life so they can get their own needs met.
All my friends have on black shoes.
This program in particular was really youth-driven. They come into YEP, they have a leadership role, and they really have a pure heart. They have their own experience and they really believe in it.
We know that other people have been through the same thing we have, and we know that we can rely on people to help us out, and people can rely on us to help them out too. So it's like if you do something, you get it back.
Alfred.
Amanda. Johanna. Jameson. Ronnie.
Demita. Damien.
Nikki. Amanda.
Assad.
Alyssa. Brittany.
Nick.
Rachel. Matthew. Jamie. Heather. Desiree.
Burhan.
Theo. Thomas. LaShonda.
Rural Iowa may seem to be a world away from the streets of Columbus, Ohio. But working against poverty happens all across the country, including America's heartland.
The people that live here on the farm contribute to the community, to the schools, family, churches, and if we don't have them, you lose everything.
The story of how people are joining forces to keep the family farm alive when among the people continues. The farms of the American heartland sustain a nation, but all too often, they cannot sustain the families that work the land.
This is a hard business to be in. There's a lot of sacrifices to be made. And when you get down to the nitty-gritty of that kind of thing, it can eliminate a lot of the people that are interested in getting into this business.
Don Narrigan's family has been farming in Iowa since the 1870s. But Don's children aren't following in his footsteps. They found better-paying jobs in cities, and young people who do want to get started in farming face tremendous barriers.
Cost is just, I bought my first combine back in 1956, paid for it the first fall. That combine cost me $4,000. To buy an equal combine today, it'd be over $80,000.
Today, many farmers sell out to large corporate farming operations that can stretch for a radius of 30 to 50 miles, with only a few people to work them.
Years ago, there might be 10 guys farming 400 acres of ground apiece, and nowadays there might be one guy farming 4,000 acres. And that's 9 less families to go to school, 9 less families to do business in the stores.
Alarmed by this threat to rural communities, farmers and local businesses came together to form an organization to help reverse the trend. The result was Ag Connect, founded in 1995. Ag Connect helps bring together ambitious young farmers who may not have the cash to buy their own farm, with older farmers looking to retire. Initially planned for 8 Iowa counties, Ag Connect has spread to cover the entire state.
Farmers are a conservative group. Initially, we were something new. They weren't real acceptable to us, but that we're getting over that now, where we're comfortable going into about every community in Iowa, talking about Ag Connect, saying, yes, we understand what you are, we've heard of you.
This may seem like work far removed from religion, but crucial early seed money for Ag Connect came from the Catholic Campaign for Human Development.
Part of the fighting against poverty involves economic development. And with Ag Connect, we're trying to help family farmers continue their work. We're encouraging economic development at a very basic grassroots level. And we're also stabilizing a basic institution of the United States.
The connections can work well for both sides, but it takes a lot of hard work and some adjustments. Ag Connect paired Don Narrigan with a young farmer named Jeff Powell.
I had help getting started farming, so we wanted to help somebody else.
Narrigan had worked with 2 other young farmers before Jeff Powell came along. Powell had been living in Tennessee, but had always dreamed of farming in Iowa.
It was to come up here to get established, to actually get where my wife and my family could get started on our own farm.
It's kind of like courtship and marriage. It takes a lot of work on both sides.
So far, things have been going well with Powell and Narrigan. Jeff Powell has been building equity in the Narrigan farm and working a small rented farm of his own.
I think the community I'm in, is going to be strong for a long time. They have a lot of projects they're working on, and I hope we'll be able to go with what little bit is available right now and make a little go of it.
Gracie, Daddy's going bye-bye.
Well, I'm benefiting from having a very stable, reliable, somebody that's able to go out and make decisions and operate the farm when I'm not here, with the idea that as time prevails and opportunity presents itself, maybe he can take over, maybe just cash rent.
There have been 26 matches since 1995, and Ag Connect is looking forward to more.
People that have tried those connects that are working now have, become a part of that community, and they're going to be the future.
Economic development, we're trying to help people who have not had opportunities and access to wealth build up some wealth, but not in a way that they're going to amass huge incomes and take it away from others, but in a way that they're able to support their own families, they're able to contribute to the betterment of their own local communities.
The idea of economic cooperation isn't just limited to agriculture. In the South Bronx, a home health care firm is making its members part of the firm and giving them a chance at new lives. 9 years ago, Ramona Picardo was working in a factory and making ends meet with welfare checks. She knew it was a dead end.
I didn't want to be in the welfare system anymore. I wanted to do something for myself and my youngest daughter, who was 13 at the time.
One problem that especially dependency on welfare into work is the fear, are they going to be able to make it? They know that welfare was not the solution for them, and yet they also knew that there was some basic support that they were getting.
Ironically, in the last few years, dominated by extremely tight labor markets. This is enormously beneficial to people headed into the labor market because when labor markets are very tight, employers really don't have much of a choice. The difficult closing down.
Since the welfare reforms of the late 1990s, the idea of moving from welfare to work has become one of the few truly visible debates about poverty in America. All too often, it's implied that any work will do for those moving from public assistance. But in poverty, a single parent with 2 kids in a minimum wage job is left nearly $3,000 below the poverty line each year. And as welfare rolls have dropped 50%, child poverty has dropped by only 7 those who are moving from public assistance into the workforce. Based in the South Bronx, Cooperative Home Care Associates employs 500 people, 70% of them former public aid recipients. Its employees work as home health care aide.
Change the nature of the home care job, of the healthcare paraprofessional job. It's a low-wage job, few benefits, and demonstrate when we created Cooperative Home Care Associates that there was a way as a business to create a job that served the client's needs and served the needs of the healthcare paraprofessional.
Founded in 1985, CHCA seed money from the Catholic Campaign for Human Development.
We could not have made the kinds of strides without the kind of support and funding and grant making that organizations like the Campaign for Human Development have made.
CHCA has succeeded in its mission by giving its workers much more than its competitors. For example, most companies in the field provide 2 weeks of training. CHCA gives 4.
We have a 4-week training program, and most other home health aid agencies train for 2 weeks. So we're investing double the time in our participants. Also, about 80% of the people who we hire are being hired out of our own training programs, but thinking, judgment, those are things that we can't teach. So we do a lot of practicing in the training in terms of activities that reinforce good judgment and good problem-solving skills. We find that those kinds of activities not only have confidence in their ability to handle themselves on the job, no matter what the situation is.
Once hired by the company, workers can take advantage of another of CHCA's special benefits, a chance to buy into the company. More than 80% of its employees have chosen to purchase shares in the business and vote for members of its board.
When I give my opinion, it comes from a place of respect for the company and how it operates. And I make decisions and weigh issues thinking about my coworkers, thinking about the patients, and also thinking about what the company needs to do to keep growing.
Higher quality training and worker ownership not only benefit the workers, in the end, they benefit the company.
The major way we compete with other businesses is simply on quality. And we believe that treating our workers right and they're having better wages and benefits is a major part in a service industry in particular of competing. That people feel good about their jobs, feel good about their work and the place that employs them. They will provide better care in people's homes every day.
The thing that I find most rewarding is when people hug me and kiss me and say thank you for everything that you've given me. And that's the most rewarding thing you can get. I love it. I love it.
In 1995, CHCA created the Paraprofessional Healthcare Institute, a not-for-profit organization that's helped set up similar companies in Boston and Philadelphia and is working for better conditions for all home health care workers.
We think we've helped people help themselves. We think we've helped the workers help themselves by providing them with an opportunity. And it's not just an opportunity to begin working. it's an opportunity to begin to develop a sense of hope about their future, that they can come into a workplace, that they can feel respected and valued.
Y ha sido mucho para mí en estos 9 años que voy a cumplir.
Now that I'm about to celebrate 9 years, I can look back and see that I have accomplished a lot. I pay my own rent, I pay my own bills, and there are just too many things that have been transformed in my life after 9 years. And I feel it's been worth it.
By empowering themselves, the poor take control of their own destinies. That's a critical part of grassroots anti-poverty work, no matter what the location. The watered banks of the Rio Grande stand in sharp contrast to the arid hills through which the river flows. In Texas and New Mexico, along the Mexican border, small, low-income communities called colonias have grown up in this desert soil. Anastasia Ledesma came to the College Park Colonia in El Paso in 1959. Like many others in the colonia, she was seeking her part of the American dream by buying the only land her family could afford. But that dream came up dry.
Nosotros no pensamos en que íbamos a tener sufrimiento del agua o por nada.
We really didn't realize how much we were going to suffer from the lack of water or services. But we felt that we needed to own our own house. And we thought, slowly, we might be able to resolve the challenges that faced us here.
The colonia had no running water and nearly impassable roads. Driving into town for 25 gallons of water a day was an ordeal. The people of the colonias knew what their community needed and deserved. But like poor people across America, they've been closed out of the existing political structure. They hadn't learned the tools they needed to effect political change. Since 1981, EPISO, the El Paso Interreligious Sponsoring Organization, has been working to change that. Though 1/3 of the county's population lives in poverty, the concerns of the poor remained off the radar screen for local politicians.
By challenging the local culture in that sense, we have brought the low-income community to the table, whether that be in education or health care or job training or water.
EPISO's guiding principle is one of economic empowerment, working for change from the ground up. Meetings and workshops show residents the way to present their concerns to elected officials and how best to fight for their causes.
I am embarrassed as an El Pasoan not to see our city government take a lead.
Bringing water to the colonias has become one of their longest battles. 18 years after their work began, 50,000 families have gained water. Anastasia Ledesma will never forget the day water first came to her house.
Tenía una sorpresa. Entonces agarré el teléfono. Entonces yo.
I was so surprised that I ran to the phone. I was pinching myself.
Porque pensaba que estaba dormida.
Because I thought, surely I must be dreaming. And I grabbed the phone and I called EPISO and I spoke to one of the organizers. Is it really true what I'm seeing here? Tell me if I'm dreaming, if I'm awake or asleep. And she said, no, you have water.
Me quedé mirando como sorpresa, con mucha sorpresa. Y me quedé mirando, pensando en tanta lucha que hemos tenido para tener el agua. Y le dije a Dios gracias.
I was so surprised. I could not believe. And I thanked God. Thank you for this blessing.
Gracias, Señor.
EPISO also took its fight for opportunity to El Paso's schools. EPISO successfully pushed for the introduction of the Alliance Schools concept, where parents are equal partners alongside administrators.
For a lot of teachers and administrators, that's a radical thing to propose because many of our families, especially in the Hispanic tradition, have not always felt welcome in the hallways of the school, and many people really would be intimidated to even walk into the front doors.
Radical changes followed.
Everybody wanted to use my computer because, and mine and my sister's, because they didn't know what a computer was.
Test scores soared from percentiles in the 20s to the 90s. Dropouts and discipline problems faded. The fight for better schools has had unexpected benefits. It's taken people who previously had no political voice and helped them discover that they can control their own destiny.
Yo pude enfrentarme con los señores de la mesa directiva, con el presidente.
I can now sit down at the table with members of the school board, with the superintendent. For the first time in my life, I can negotiate with them, thanks to IPISO, because they taught us to engage in a good dialogue.
IPISO
has helped me to develop as a person, to fight for my rights and those of the community, and above all, to face problems head-on.
Too many times in the United States we look for the fast solutions, and often we find that those solutions don't last. The Catholic Campaign for Human Development is not into fast solutions. We're into working and building relationships in local communities to find the long-term solutions. We want to end poverty not just for a day, but for a lifetime.
Before the water lines came to the colonia, Anastasia Ledesma watered her garden with the mineral-laced water from a well her family had dug.
In fact, out here I have a grapevine. That grapevine was stuck in a small size. It wasn't flowering. It certainly wasn't bearing fruit. But when water came into this community, I started watering it, and you can see it now. If water is needed for proper growth with plants, how much more for human beings? Without water, we can't survive.
Whether it's in a Texas colonia, an office in New York City, or an Iowa farm, there's one constant. The key to grassroots anti-poverty action lies in empowerment, helping people help themselves, letting justice surge like water.
Low-income and poor families have so long been marginalized and ignored that once they see there is an avenue that allows them to come to the table and be an equal partner, whether that be at the school board or the city council or whatever, it just opens up all kinds of very wonderful possibilities, and it gets things done.
We all know, love your neighbor. Use the Good Samaritan story. You know, this is the story. You are via television walking by the ditch. You know, here is the broken reaching up and saying, "Hey, I need a hand right now. You know, something happened to me, and it's time for us to respond." The gospel call is to reach out to the person you don't know, and the person that has indicated that they are in trouble.
I think what hope means to me is the expectation and the belief that what is best in us, in this great country of ours, will rise to the surface and reinstate itself when it comes to what we need and to help the poor. And another aspect of hope that I think is important has to do with this very firm sense of self-reliance, which is a key to hope for people who are poor themselves, a sense that they can manage their own futures, that they will see fruits to their labors.
I think it's important for people in the United States to realize that poverty is right in their own backyards. and that we can solve poverty for a lifetime by getting involved in working with people who are living in poverty to find local solutions, to help them to find opportunities for better jobs with living wages, to help them find ways to improve their local educational institutions so that their children don't have to go through the pain and suffering that they have faced through their lifetimes, and to bring new hope and a new life to communities.
There was a story of these guys that were walking along the beach, and they saw this man that in the distance looked as if he was dancing. As they got closer, however, they noticed that there were thousands of starfish all over the beach. And this guy was actually running up, grabbing one starfish and running towards the water and hurling it as far as he could. And they got to him and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm throwing starfish back into the ocean so that they can live." He said, "There are millions of starfish all over the place. You can't possibly make a difference." And he went and grabbed a starfish and threw it as far as he could. He said it made a difference for that one. Our job is to make a difference in someone's life, to take them out of the darkness of despair into the light of opportunity and hopefulness.
The presence of poverty in a wealthy society offers a challenge, a call to those unwilling to simply stand by. In building a better society, there are no quick fixes, no simple answers. Solutions lie with those who are willing to make a commitment and join a community confronting poverty in their own backyards. It's not easy work, but by banding together, ordinary Americans have shown how a mixture of faith and dedication can bring empowerment, hope, and change.